Hello. Okay, so the idea I've been exploring recently is I was trying to figure out where energy comes from. And my formula for it was something like aesthetic um, creates. Why is aesthetic important? It's because it makes you focus on self or be able to view self uh, or sense of self. And a really strong sense of self can be easily converted into energy. So I think I've made a previous video about aesthetic, um, and but I hadn't made the connection for why aesthetic connects to energy. So aesthetic, I'm not gonna explain. Basically, this is the connection. This is the pipeline. Uh, you do something that you think is aesthetic. You start viewing yourself from different angles, and that gives you energy to keep going regardless of which state you're in. So let's say you are pushing through something, there's going to be different phases of pushing. There's going to be um, in the startup phase, which is you're just starting, you're the upcomer, you're the underdog. Then there's going to be the maturation. Don't know if that's a word. Um, Basically the phase where your startup or the idea becomes more mature, more fleshed out, more developed. Then there's the saturation, where the idea becomes kind of well developed, um, maybe it starts becoming like almost obvious how it's gonna work. I guess we can cut out the exact phases, they don't really matter, but they feel a little bit differently, each one of them. So you have different phases, and these phases they feel differently. If you have an aesthetic of I'm a struggler, I must feel pain and suffer, then you're gonna love the startup phase because it's probably the most painful one. Um, in terms of let's say you're entering any field or you're trying to do something, you have the least amount of skills, you have the most amount of skills to learn, you have the highest amount of workload, it's the least familiar, you feel the least competent. In that environment, if you have an aesthetic of I'm a struggler, you will actually uh, be able to see yourself in the startup phase. You're gonna see the struggle in that, and hence see yourself. So, and being able to see yourself in something that you do is extremely important because it's the pipeline to energy. Um, if you don't see yourself in something that you do, you cannot access energy. At least that was the initial thought process I had. And whatever. So aesthetic is, how should I say, the supplier of this way of seeing yourself, and if you have a really strong aesthetic, it can help you see yourself from different angles and different phases. So in saturation, you might be like, well, now I need to see myself as another or whatever. Um, you need to, if you want to have consistent flow of energy, you need to be able to see yourself um, in an according way for each phase. So the problem with strugglers, for example, is they might struggle to see the aesthetic in winning. I think this is a real problem I've had for years, maybe still have. Um, I love suffering, I love doing hard things, but once I get past saturation and the idea becomes trivial and easy and I see how it connects, like once the questions are answered in my head, it just stops being interesting. And because it stops being interesting, I stop seeing myself in it. Uh, I don't get energy from it. So paradoxically, the easier something becomes, the harder it becomes for me to actually finish it. At least this is what I found. And it manifests in so many small ways in so many different fields. It's like a consistent thing I've observed. So I guess that's a problem with a single aesthetic. Another thing I realized is aesthetics are they're kind of fleeting. They're not a consistent thing. You can't build your world around aesthetics and remain that to stay or expect that to stay consistent unless you're extremely dumb or extremely mentally ill or you have very small amount of um, churn in your ideas. You don't reflect that much. That can really work there because you don't change, and because you don't change, you don't need to. Your aesthetics aren't, devolving. With me personally, I have suffered, or not suffered, I've experienced a severe loss of aesthetic. I've basically stopped seeing aesthetic in anything. And that was the most debilitating thing I've experienced. Um, it just completely like pulled the plug. And what I've been trying to do for all of the time since that is try to recover an aesthetic, try to find a new aesthetic. What's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Blah 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 blah. And the conclusion I've come to very recently is that's a wrong approach. The reason why aesthetics stick is usually because they have some form of audience. Like something can only be aesthetic if it can be observed. And if you're observing just yourself and no one else is observing you and you're not taking their feedback, then aesthetics will naturally degrade over time because there's no reason for them to stay. For example, uh, in usual situations, you might have I don't know, let's say you're a mechanic and I don't know, you have friends and you do some little jobs to help them and they value that, and in them valuing that, they might reinforce your aesthetic of you being a mechanic. They might compliment you, they might reward you, they might respect you more, whatever. By doing those things, they reinforce the aesthetic of you being a mechanic. You're like, oh, this thing makes me feel so good. I am this thing, and you start to identify with this thing. And if this thing was to be ignored completely, you're a mechanic and you're to get nothing from it, then this reinforcement would just die out. So, for example, if someone comes to you with really big mental illness or trauma, the place to just to ignore it, stop feeding the fire. Uh, maybe talk to them about it, but you don't need to cater to their aesthetic of like, oh, my life is so bad, blah blah blah. You don't need to sit there and empathize with them. Yeah, you can, or how should I say, you don't need to justify or reinforce the aesthetic that they have. Like, oh, your life is so hard. Oh, you are such a victim. All you're doing is reinforcing the aesthetic they have in their head. Uh, you can still talk to them, you can still listen to them, but you don't need to cater to their aesthetic. You don't, and a lot of time that is what they're fishing for. Okay, so you have an aesthetic, and it's for it to be solid and consistent, it needs to be reinforced by people or your environment. I'm a mechanic, I do mechanic things, and it, it can literally be anything. I'm a pretty girl, I do pretty things. Uh, I don't know. I'm a quirky gambling addict, I do quirky gambling addict things. I don't know. Whatever. Everyone has a form of aesthetic, and when people perceive you, it usually reinforces the whatever aesthetic that you have dominant because you act in accordance to your aesthetic, um, and that's how change can happen. For example, if someone sees something in you that you have not seen, they might offer you a new aesthetic, and you're like, holy shit, I've just been a gambling addict my whole life, but now I can be a dad and start a family and be responsible. uh, that's why some people are capable of throwing away the addictions or way of life that they couldn't for years, all relatively quickly. Uh, it's because they get offered a new aesthetic and they are like, damn, okay, I want to ride with this. I want this aesthetic. Uh, but that's a choice. It doesn't mean that every single time you offer someone an aesthetic, they're gonna take it. Uh, it needs to be appealing to them in the first place. It's like, uh, whatever. I'm not gonna break that down. I could go down that path for an hour or something. So this is the core idea. You have an aesthetic. It's reinforced by other people, and then the question becomes, what happens if you reject opinions of others? Or what happens if you reject aesthetic that comes from how other people see you? And this is what I did. I've uh, reflected and I've rejected all of the things that people respected me for as a form of identity. I've thrown it away, and I've also changed the way I see people to a point where it's kind of irrelevant what they think of me. It doesn't really create an aesthetic. Um, that or lack of subscription to others and their views of you will always or will destroy your aesthetic. It won't be immediate. You will be able to create aesthetics and build them up for a little bit, but over time, it's like the shore of the sea. The waves will erode whatever the hell is there. It You're fighting a battle against the universe. You will not win. It just cannot sustain itself. Um, it will drain you, and it will if you are trying to force it. So in that situation, what I found myself in is I don't have access to aesthetic. I don't find anything aesthetic. I don't um, really care that much about anything. But I want energy. I don't want to be limited by some random bullshit, view of others on myself. but I want energy. And what I've realized is aesthetic isn't the only source of sense of self. Sense of self is, let's kind of break that down. That's the ability of placing yourself or understanding how you exist within the world or something along those lines. Um, so, for example, aesthetic creates your sense of self is look at me, look how I am this. That creates a sense of self. But there are other forms of sense of self. For example, and it's not as simple as I think therefore I am. I think it's a pretty retarded way to base your sense of self. Uh, because just thinking on its own does not create a sense of self. What creates sense of self is little indicators that you actually exist. For example, you have a big reality. You have your big world, and it has a whole bunch of objects. And it, uh, it's just a large, brainless, obstacle or whatever, series of obstacles, or not even obstacles, just random shit that exists, right? And when you apply effort onto the world and you don't see it changing, it diminishes your sense of self in a sense that, I don't know, again, let's say you have a wall and you're punching it and the wall hasn't changed after 10 hours of you punching it, you're gonna be like, nah, I'm pretty fucking insignificant compared to this wall. And then that could turn into an aesthetic thing, but um, okay, actually, yeah, okay, so whether you break the wall or not is likely an aesthetic thing. Like, oh my god, I'm so strong. Oh my god, I'm so weak. But how should I say? Um, okay, I'll just skip to the answer that I've come to, and then maybe I could explain it. S Struggling against reality and feeling the friction is what can form your sense of self. In a sense that, imagine you're blind, imagine you are deaf. You have no way of observing the reality around you or observing anything. For all you know, you could be, you just exist in nothingness and nothing matters, nothing significant, whatever. And do you really even exist? In that situation, uh, when you start, uh, if you were to walk forward and start walking into a wall or something, and you were to feel this force that opposes you, by feeling this force and resisting it and pushing, you start to feel your own force. And in that sense, you begin to observe or sense yourself by feeling the force that you are capable of. Or And not in an aesthetic sense, like, oh my God, look how capable I am. I'm a Greek god. I mean in a sense, in a very literal sense. I mean it in a sense of you exert energy and um, apply force onto something, no matter what it is, regardless of even if you see it move or not. Just the act of doing so is proof that you exist because you're able to do so. It's the biggest proof that you exist. Um, you're not some sort of a ghost that is just stuck in his thinking and is just applies force and he goes through things and nothing connects and he exists on some subatomic level or some shit. Um, you are a real part of this world that can apply force and that really exists, and that uh, will build your sense of self. And there are things that can make it really hard to see yourself, and there are things that make it very easy. For example, any physical work, anything uh, where you're constantly, I don't know, either breaking things or moving things where you can visually see the impact you've had, and if you can associate yourself with that impact, they will grow your sense of self, and that's why it feels so liberating in some ways to do things like that. Um, and there are things where it's a lot harder to see yourself. I guess. Hmm. Okay, there's another nuance here. Let's say you're, I should say, you're doing something and you really don't like it. You don't see the aesthetic in it. You think it's dumb. I don't know. Let's say you're at school and you're doing fucking geography. Why the fuck do I need geography? Um, Complete useless subject. And you can't, how should I say, yes, you're able to exert force in it, and you might be able to do it or succeed in it, but it doesn't grow your sense of self. Why? I mean, you could argue that it's the aesthetic, you don't see aesthetic in what you're doing. Yeah, that's fair. Uh, I would like to say that something else is more powerful here, which is the form with which you do it. You might not see the aesthetic in geography, and because of that, you're gonna apply like lackluster bullshit form. You're just gonna half-ass it, and that's going to take a form of expression out of it. Like how you do something is a form of expression. What you do isn't really a form of expression. There could be a million people doing the same thing, but one of them will do it slightly differently, and that's what will make his attempt his. And doing something, how should I say, just applying force on its own can still erode your sense of self as long as you're not taking ownership of how you do it qualitatively. Again, the same example I gave with you're breaking things, you're moving things, whatever. That can erode your sense of self if you start seeing yourself as just a disposable. Well, that's an aesthetic. If you don't put in, if you don't do it with the correct form, if you don't, if you don't. really push yourself to do your best, you can't really feel um, where the you part is in the activity unless you do that. It's very hard to explain. It's something I perceive on a more sensual feeling level. It's this feeling. It's not a happy or a sad feeling. It's just a feeling of like pushing and pushing to your limits. I don't know how to put it. Let's say there's a cup and I don't know, you're to feel its shape, you need to like push it around the surface level, first surface area of the cup to kind of feel where it is or how strong it is or how flexible or whatever it is, right? If you just put your hand in a cup like in the middle without pushing or trying to expand it, you don't feel that it is there on a sensual level. And the same is true for yourself. If you don't try to expand and push your self in that correct form, if you don't actually try to fill it fully, then you won't feel like you exist, even though you're putting in effort, you're filling the cup or whatever, you're interacting with it on a daily basis. Unless you are gripping it very hard, or the harder you grip it, the more um, the more defined your sense of the cup becomes. You might start uh, feeling like little indents or little patterns or little scratches or whatever uh, artifacts there might be on the material. And if you didn't push it, you will never have sensed those. So, in a sense, how it differs from aesthetic, aesthetic looks at, oh my god, it's a beautiful cup. Look how beautiful I am by doing this. Form is when you try to do things as perfectly as possible. I don't mean it in a perfectionist way, which is still based on aesthetic. I mean it in a I am going to expand to the best of my ability and in doing so feel myself uh, or kind of feel the constraints of myself, feel my limits, feel what I am right now, feel where I am, and that creates a very sense of self, which is very grounding. It's not connected to this imaginary, um, almost poetic, aesthetic sense, which actually damages your sense of self if you try to engage with it too much. Um, it creates a very grounded, literal way. It's like imagine someone who's never fought before or has never done any physical sport and they think they can wrestle a bear. It's because they have an aesthetic of self, but no actual understanding of their capability. If someone has been wrestling, someone has been doing a whole bunch of sports, they're going to have a way more accurate and way more grounded understanding of themselves. And what you will also find is people that do those things and are more grounded are less depressed. Why? Because they have a stronger sense of self. Um, if anything, I think what causes a lot of issues, like inability to find, meaning of your life or whatever, um, which leads to depression, then or what causes that is inability to it's a disconnect from self. And if you were to partake in abilities that reinforce that connection, they don't feel like euphoric or pleasurable, but they feel liberating. They feel very grounding and fulfilling in a sense. Okay, so to summarize the idea I was putting forward, I still need to test this. This is a very new idea to me. Is aesthetics are no go, especially if you live your life like me, where you don't want to be limited by, or you don't want to be bound by the aesthetic of which other people attribute to you. Then you need to just desubscribe from aesthetics completely and completely dumb it down. Um, I have a life. I must exert uh, myself as much as possible so that I can feel that I am here. I must give everything that I do uh, a touch of, I don't know, not perfection, but um, enough energy so that I can perceive myself by the reaction that I get from the world. Like the thing that makes you feel that the cup is there is the reaction that the cup exerts on you. Same with the world. You're pushing, uh, you're punching a wall, the wall is reacting to you and hurting you. That reaction is, I'm not saying you need to hurt yourself. I'm saying that even a gentle, steady, consistent pushing onto something, it will um, reinforce your sense of self. And that will give you energy because I don't know how to put it, you learn what you are, and when you learn that, it becomes, I don't know, it just makes your energy in sync with your body. It's no longer something that's disconnected, that is there, but you can't access it and or it's lost. It's like, no, I am in connection. I'm in sync with self, and I'm able to access all the reserves of energy that are should be available to me. And my thesis or my theory is if you can live your life like this for a relatively long time is it reinforces and makes it stronger, and you should be able to go at your max potential this way without any, I don't know, ups or downs. Those are caused by aesthetics collapsing in different phases. I don't know. This goes against everything that I've kind of believed for a long time. I guess we will see.